Edward Snowden's quest for asylum and accusations of U.S. surveillance were just some of the issues discussed by South American leaders during this week's Mercosur Trade Bloc Summit. Joining me now to talk more about this is Patricio Zamorano, who is an academic from George Washington University, and you are also the editor of InfoAmericas.info. Thanks for joining us. You know, I mentioned there that these countries talked about U.S. surveillance, but they're also talking about diplomatic action, withdrawing their ambassadors from France, Spain, Portugal, and Italy. Now, how significant is that kind of diplomatic action?
Well, it's very significant. They're recalling the ambassador, the representatives of these countries. Actually, we are talking about like a block of countries, very important countries. Actually, we are talking about Brazil, Argentina, Uruguay, and Venezuela. So it's very significant because they are acting as a block. Basically, as a group of countries, we feel offended. That's the message, basically. And if you see the declaration is extremely strong, and they say that the fact that President Morales was not allowed to use airspace of Portugal, France, Spain, and Italy, that was hostile, that was offensive, it was against human rights and international law, it was discriminatory. So I would say the message is extremely strong. The Latin American countries are acting as a bloc against Europe and against the US pressure, basically, on the case of Snowden.
Yeah, that's right. There were very tough words coming out of that Mercosur summit. As you said, you know, they used words like discriminatory, arbitrary, and groundless was one of the words they used, no pun intended. But they do have a point, don't they? I mean, imagine if this was the plane belonging to the leader of some European country, or perhaps the plane belonging to the President of the United States. That would never happen.
Never, never. That's why the Latin American countries are using even the word colonialism to describe what happened with President Morales. He is the president of a small country, but in terms of international law and the immunity that he actually has as a president of the Bolivian people, I would say he deserves the same respect as any other president. We cannot imagine that something like that happens to President Obama and the Air Force One. It's impossible to imagine that. So that's why they are saying we are not going to accept this, because it could happen in the future. If the Latin American region doesn't react strongly, with the fact that Snowden is still there and maybe he's going to come to Latin America, I think the presidents are trying to make sure that this is not going to happen again.
Right, because that sets a very bad precedent, doesn't it? If a country doesn't like what another country is doing, then they simply deny overflight rights. Now, the European countries, for their part, saying that, and this is what they say, it was a misunderstanding, it was conflicting information. Does that sound credible to you, that they would stop a president's plane flying over their countries because of a misunderstanding, because of conflicting information?
Well, it's very hard to believe that this was only based on a rumor, basically. What they are not saying is where that information came from. We suspect that maybe that information, that intelligence was coming from the US. They haven't confirmed that, though, although they are trying to send some apologies. But the problem is we need to make sure where that pressure is coming from. And the situation of Snowden now is extremely complicated, because in fact, as you were talking to the person in Venezuela, we need to figure out how Snowden is gonna come to Latin America, through where. I believe that it could be through Cuba maybe, or a direct flight, but the situation now after the Morales issue is very clear message against anyone who will try to help Snowden to come from Europe to Latin America.
Right, another issue that was discussed by Mercosur, and there was a lot of anger expressed over this, was over the alleged U.S. interception of telecommunications, telephone calls, etc. The leader said this is a violation of human rights and the rights of citizens to privacy and information.
Exactly, and I would say it was a very big surprise, the strong words of President of Brazil. She said that she's going to send this issue to the United Nations. So she's not just willing to discuss it in a diplomatic way. She wants to discuss it at the highest level. And the other thing, Brazil was very surprised by the fact that the US, the NSA, actually had a base in Brazil. From that base, they were trying to intercept communications in 2001, 2002 is not clear. And we just find out that actually the U.S. was intercepting communication in several countries, not only in Brazil, but in Colombia, and Chile, and Argentina, and Mexico. So I would say the governments are reacting very strongly because they know now how wide and how strong the interception program was. So it's a serious situation, and I would say it's complicating the relationship between the U.S. and Latin America as a region.
Right. Yeah. Patricio Zamorano, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.